Okay, we're going to get things started with News King today. News King is very important to all of the news operations that you're going to do in BC 415, or if you're affiliated with the newscast at all. News King not only controls the teleprompting of the show, but it also controls the back end of the show where you produce the show, you write the show, you format the stories how you want them to appear on air, and we also print rundowns off of News King for the production crew to follow along with the show and know what shots they're going to need for every story. Okay, so we're going to get started. You're going to need to click on News King, and the News King icon appears like this. It's blue and it says News King. It will be somewhere different on your computer, but once you're on the Windows side, you need to get to the News King icon. So go ahead and click on that, double click that. Here you may have some kind of warning that pops up. Just say yes. It'll take a few minutes to load up, so be aware of that. Sometimes it can take a few seconds. Okay, so your username may pop up with your ecom. That is not what you're going to use for News King. That is just a default that pops up. What you need to do is put in your first initial of your first name, all in lowercase, and then you're going to put your complete last name. So for me, that's J. Crichton. For you, it'll be obviously something different. Okay, and then your password will be all lowercase news, N-E-W-S. That goes for everybody in the class. So keep that in mind. Make sure you get logged in. My password is a little bit different as the administrator. Okay. So when you get logged into News King, you're probably going to see a blank page that looks just like this. This is actually the assignment editor window. Because we've not had an assignment editor for the last year, we don't have anything written here. But if we did have someone putting in notes, it would appear on this page here. Obviously, you can see there's an area for the story, where the story is taking place, the dates, if there's a photographer available, any editors, working on it, reporters, equipment, etc., contact, comments. So this is actually the assignment desk for News King, and we really aren't using that for this semester. Okay, so the first thing that you need to do when you get inside News King is get into the correct show template. You'll find that on the left side of the screen under shows. Okay, so make sure this is the tree window. You're going to open this up, open up shows, and you'll see a drop down. Now, I've recorded this before the first week of school, so the dates that you guys are going to want to use may not be here right now. However, when you open it up on Tuesday, you're going to see different dates. Okay, so if you don't see the dates that you want to see, what you can do is click on shows and then right click. And when you right click, you can hit select dates. This opens up a calendar, a drop down menu. And you can start your range at any time you want to in the calendar. I can go back to 2015 if I want to. And News King actually archives every single show we've ever done. So all of the old shows from years back are also still here in News King. But what you guys are going to want to do is open up today's date, which should be January 19th. Okay. And make sure your end of range makes sense because you can't go backwards, obviously. So you can open up till the 21st if you want. Hit OK. And those are the dates that you're going to want to see. Open up 1/19/2016. And then the correct show template is right here. It's News 3 Live at 4. And you'll click on it. Double click that. It'll take a second to load. And here is our show template. Okay, so right now we're seeing the default view of the show. This is the view that the director would actually be looking at to figure out what the show order is. This is the switcher column, so the show director will be putting all the information in here that the production crew needs. That's not something necessarily that the producer has to worry about, but what the producer does has an effect on the switcher column, but we'll be getting to that a little bit later. Okay, so you're in News King, you're in the correct template, News 3 live at 4 for today's date, which should be Tuesday, January 19th. Okay, so as the producer, you need to be in the producer view of News King. So what you're going to do is you're going to right click on this rundown, load column format, click that, and you'll see the different column formats. You have a couple different options: producer, radio, default, and all. What you want to do is hit the producer mode. Okay, so you load that by hitting the load button here, click it, and now you're in the producer format. So this is what the producer should be looking at whenever they're building the show. And how you'll know you're in producer format: let's say you accidentally click out of it, or you have to reload News King and you have the default version. You'll notice if you're in the wrong format, you will not see this pink column here, item number. So that's a telltale sign right there that you're not in the producer format. Okay, so moving on, now that you're in the correct format, we're going to learn how to add a story. Okay, so as you see, this is the template. We have all the different elements of the show right here. We have the bumper, which is the beginning of the show. That's the pre-produced video that says you're watching a production by the Department of Broadcasting and Journalism, etc., etc. That's that element. It's about 10 seconds or long or so. That's what this indicates right here. The news open is a short open announcing that, it's the News 3's broadcast. And then we typically start the show with a pre-show tease. Okay, so the pre-show tease, if you've ever watched the newscast before, this is like what they call a cold open. It's not the anchors on camera right away. We're teasing some of the most important stories, or maybe we're teasing some of the stories that have the best video off the top of the show. So this is a way to get your audience interested in the entirety of the show, but you don't want to give everything away about what those stories are about. So it's a way to intrigue the audience, to get them interested in several stories. And we typically do 3 stories, as you see here. This is the welcome. This is where you'll see the anchors first. You can see the format here. It's on a 2-shot because we always begin with both anchors on camera here. The rest of this is weather. You can expand the columns if you want to. You see by doing that, by dragging them over, if you go to the top. The 2-box toss does not necessarily go after the welcome. It's just there. So keep that in mind. Some of these elements are just in there, but you might move them around within this block here. All right. So the 2-box toss is a way to show maybe the anchors and the weather person in a box together when we're introducing weather. You have the first look weather center. This is where the weather anchor is on a 1-shot at the weather center, introing their weather segment. It's only about 30 seconds long, as you see here. They intro it for about 10 seconds on camera, and then we go to their weather graphics. And this is just a first look. So this is an introduction to the weather for today, maybe a look into tomorrow, but nothing really long because we have a 2-minute and 30 weather block you see here in the C block, and that's where the full weather takes place. Typically about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. It can be expanded, it can be minimized. Okay. So, and then you see after that where 9 is indicated, the tease to B block. And this is where you're teasing what's coming up in the next block of content. And that typically we stick regional and national news in the B block, and some of the most important information for our viewers. And our viewers are typically McDonough County residents, specifically Macomb residents, anyone who can get our station within the area on Comcast Channel 3. Also, people are able to watch on YouTube, but we don't really include them in our local news broadcast, at least thinking about them when we're talking to our audience. I mean, it is a way to watch from anywhere within the world, but we're really focused on being a hyper-local newscast. So we typically will cover McDonough County and some of the areas surrounding McDonough County. Okay, so what you see in this A block typically will be local news or maybe breaking news. You never know when you're going to have something happen nationally that should be discussed right off the top. So anything of great importance that is happening, right before the show begins at 4 o'clock p.m., or something that happens that everyone will be talking about later, we're going to include in this A block here. All right, so as you'll see, we have several blocks of content. The A block, as indicated here, is all local and breaking news. And then we have the B block. We have a break, about a 2-minute break, as indicated here. We have commercials, and then the B block is the regional national news, and then we tease our weather block. After the next break, we have weather. So that's where we have in the C block that 2-minute 2:30 weather segment. And then this is where we also tease sports at the end of it, and the sports anchor comes in and teases sports. And then as we go further down, we have the D block. The D block is handled primarily by the sports anchor, whoever that is, either Tuesday or Thursday. They will write the bulk of this block. All you as a writer has to worry about is the tease to the kicker. Obviously you have to check to make sure that the anchor, the sports anchor put their cameras in and that kind of thing. Typically they do, but you just need to check that over. But what you're writing is the tease to the kicker. And the tease to the kicker is talking about some kind of, lighthearted or funny story at the end of the show. That's what the kicker is. If you've never heard of a kicker before, typically newscasts will end with a lighthearted story. It helps segue into the goodbye. It's difficult for an anchor team to go from, a hard news story like a murder story to, hey, and this is the end of the show, thank you for watching, that kind of thing. That's kind of a train wreck. So typically newscasts will end with some kind of lighthearted story, so they can segue into the goodbye, tell you to keep watching, or keep watching the next show. And in your case, you don't have to worry about that if you're working at a real affiliate, a real news affiliate. You are worried about people staying tuned. You want them to stay with your station and not tune out. We don't really have to worry about our programming after us, but we still follow a lot of the same rules any other TV station would follow as well, because I want you guys to understand that's what people want from you as a TV news producer. Okay, so we still will do the lighthearted kicker. Sometimes we'll have a final weather segment, especially if the weather is important for that day. If it's really cold out, or if it's really icy, or if the weather is changing, it could be a source of trouble for people in the area, we'll do that final weather. If we are light in the show, and light means we have maybe 30 or 40 seconds more in the show than we originally thought we would, and we need to kill that and use that time up, we will, have the weather person talk about weather for maybe 30 seconds. 30 seconds is accounted for right now, but you can always change that as a news producer, change the time. And then we have the goodbye, and that is fairly the same every semester. It's just changing out the names and maybe saying it a little bit differently, but it's typically the same. And I'll show you guys an example of that from an old show coming up here. And then we have the credits, and the credits are always about 30 seconds. We account for 30 seconds. Do we actually see the credit roll for 30 seconds every show? No. Maybe we'll have it for 10 seconds, maybe we'll have it for 15, but it's always slated for 30 seconds, and that's something that's good to keep in mind. So you have that extra 30 seconds pad in case of emergency. You can, as long as you get the copyright up at the end, that's the most important part. You need to get that copyright in. So even if it's up for 5 seconds, that's fine as long as that copyright's there. Okay, so let's say you want to add a story, and I'm just going to make something up here. Let's say I'm writing a local story about a water line break. What you'll need to do is you'll click in the A block where your local news goes, okay, and then you will right click and you'll go to add item. So go ahead and do that. Right click in the rundown, preferably in the A block, and click add item. Okay, so you'll see this window pop up and it says enter a name and choose type. Now the choose type part is correct. You want it to be script, so make sure it says script. And then enter a name. Now this is what your script name is going to be, otherwise known as a slug. A slug is, maybe a 3-word title for what your story is about. Okay, and I said I was going to do a waterline break, so I'm going to put waterline break in. But you know what? It's in lowercase, so I need to go back. Because you see all the rest of the slugs are all uppercase, you're also going to write in uppercase for TV news. And that is just typically how we do it. Every station I've ever worked at has done things in uppercase, and I'm continuing that trend here. All right, so waterline break. But I'm not finished yet. If you guys went over the syllabus, you noted that I asked that you put your slugs in with your name, your last name at the end, maybe a hyphen in your last name. So make sure you do that. I want everyone to get accustomed to writing your last name in there. So, and this is so I know who wrote the story. If I have a question about the story later, or if you want credit for your story and you'll want to get credit for your news stories that you write, you'll have to. That's part of the class. You'll need to make sure your name is in there so it's not a guessing game for me. All right. So I hit OK, and my slug, my new story, is in here. Now it's not written. It's just the name, but at least that's the first step, is that you have to put a script line inside the show. And then what you do is you double click that script and it opens up a Microsoft Word document. Now this is not like the average Microsoft Word document, because it actually has some different things that you can do with only News King. And it only can be done on the computers that you're sitting at. Okay, so what you need to do is go to add-ins, and you'll see and that's to the right, to the far right, you should have add-ins there. And if you don't, you need to let me know via email that you cannot see this, because everyone in the class should have access to this. Okay, so go to the far right on the top, hit add-ins, and you'll see all of these different things pop up here on the upper left-hand corner of your Microsoft Word document, things that you've never seen before, because this is exclusively for News King's use. All right, so you'll see NK, you'll see TA, which means talent, you'll see VI, means video, CG means CG, character generated graphic, SS for still store, and then these other icons. We are going to really worry about the white and black one. That one is useful, and the rest of them we really don't use. They have different. We're not in radio. We're not doing radio, for instance, so we're not using that one. All right, so I'm going to write a story about a waterline break. All right, so the first thing that you need to do is you need to know what kind of story is this going to be. Do you have video for it? If you don't have video for it, then that is known as a reader. And a reader is a story that's read all on camera. Okay, so make sure that you know what kind of format your story is going to be. If it's all on camera, then that means that you're going to have one of the talent, one of the anchors read it. All right, and that means that you need a talent box that designates who's reading it and what camera they're on. Okay, so you actually need to go to the fourth option down here. After you clicked TA, hit talent, hit OK, and then it brings up this new window. All right, it says name and asks you for the switcher. The thing is, you don't know who's going to read it yet, and you also don't know what camera they're going to be. And the switcher means, you know, what camera, what button on the switcher would the technical director be hitting. You don't know that as the producer. You have not figured that out yet. You're just writing the story. Okay, one of the last things we do for the show before we print everything out is decide who is reading and what camera they're on. So that is something that you wait to do until the end. But you should put in a talent box right off the top. Even though it's blank, you'll go in and fill that out later. So go ahead and hit OK, because we don't know who that person is yet. Okay, so now there's a talent box in there, but you see the cursor is blinking on the left side, and in TV format, the left side of the script should be the video commands. The right side of the script should be the dialogue, right? It's a 2-column format. And it's not going to happen like that. See, if I start writing, it's underneath the talent box. So that's not what you want. So I'm going to delete that. And I'll show you how to fix that. All right. So now that it's blinking on the left-hand side, remember we talked about the split page, that white and the black icon up here? Go ahead and click that. It's showing you a split page read. You're going to click that. Now your cursor should be jumped to the right side of the screen. And this is where you can start writing your story, whatever made-up story you're doing. Okay, so I hope you're following along right here. You don't have to necessarily write a real story, but go ahead and just get some experience typing on the screen here. All right, and it should be uppercase. You should be doing it with your caps lock on. And if you don't, that's okay at first, but you will need to go back and make everything all caps for the anchors to read. So if you do this in lowercase, the perk to lowercase writing is that if you spell something wrong, well, first of all, it changed it for me, which is nice. It doesn't always change it for you, I'll tell you that. It will either change it for you, maybe to the correct word if it recognizes it, or it will tell you, you know, put a little squiggly line underneath that and tell you there's something wrong with it, all right? Let's say you spell check it, all right, and now you know the words are all spelled correctly, because that's important. We don't want anyone to stumble over something that's not a real word or the wrong word, which sometimes is worse. You can go back, highlight everything, right? Highlight your script, and then change your case. So you go to the big A, the little a right there, click it, click uppercase, and then it makes all of the words in your script uppercase. Everything that was highlighted will now be uppercase. So that's a very useful tool that I will use on occasion. Okay, just make sure that whenever you do finish your script that you do uppercase everything. Everything should be all caps. And why do we do this? Why is a TV script, especially a TV news script, in uppercase? They've been doing it like this for a very, very long time, much longer than I've been in TV news. Studies have shown that uppercase versus sentence case or lowercase text, it doesn't help readability necessarily, but it's just something that's been commonly done since the times of typing on a typewriter onto a long sheet of paper. It's been that way a very long time. So I'm not going to change that. And most TV stations, if you get a job at a TV station, will do the same thing. They will also have their stories in uppercase. So it's just a good habit to get used to in case you do go into television news. Okay, so let's say your story is finished. And you see that the next line will kind of be off to the left a little bit more. The first line is indented and the second line is not. If you hit enter, it'll indent the line. And that actually helps. Helps the readability for the news anchor because it's not all one block of text. One block of text is harder to read. So if you just kept typing and never hit enter, eventually it would just kind of look like a big block of words, which can be kind of confusing, right? So that's why I tell people write a sentence, hit enter, because then it's a little bit easier to read. You can see that's a little bit easier to read than that block of text right here, but obviously it's not spelled right. Okay, so let's say now that you want to save. You want to say, I'll go back to my Microsoft Word document, it's there. Let's say you want to save everything. Do not hit this icon. Do not hit that icon. There's actually a better way to do it. I talked to the makers of News King last year, and they gave me a little tip on saving scripts. Okay, what you want to do is hit Control on your keyboard and S. Control S. It'll see how it's saving it. Here, I'll hit it again. So it saves your script for you with just a keystroke, and it will help you move faster in News King. What you need to do is move very quickly when you're producing a show. You'll find that time ticks by really fast when you need to fill this 30-minute show. So Control S will allow you to save your scripts, all of your scripts. So hit Control S, and then you'll want to close the script. Do not, I repeat, do not hit that X right over there in that right hand corner. Do not hit this X, okay? If you hit that X, you will lock the script for about 10 to 15 minutes where no one can get in to edit it, and neither can you. Neither can you edit the script. Do I know why that happens? Probably some quirk in the Word document working with News King. Word is not really meant to work with another piece of software, but News King is, making it work with Word. So it's probably some kind of quirk with the two softwares interacting. Do not hit that X. So how do you close out your script when you're finished with it? Because you do not want 20 scripts open at once. That will also not be useful. It'll be confusing. All right. What you do is another keystroke, and you'll want to write this down, remember it. And I really do emphasize, take some notes. Watching this video is great, but you'll want to take notes on this because it will help you in the long run remember how to do these things. If you're writing it down, it will stick in your head. It just will. That's how our brains work. Okay. So what you need to do after you've Controlled S and saved it, you'll now Control W. Control W closes it out, and we're good. It's still there. You see all of my made up words and some of the text I wrote in there equals out to 11 seconds. ERT, if you see the ERT column here, means estimated read time. Estimated read time. So what News King does is it estimates how long the scripts that you write will take the anchor to read. It estimates how long it takes for someone to read. It looks at all the words and how long they are and just gives that estimated read time. And that's really useful when you're putting the show together because you're able to kind of figure out how long or short the show is and how much time you need to fill. And as you see, if we go down to the very bottom here, try to move this out of your way. It's how I am accessing my computer right now. All right. right here is how light the show is. You see 16:20. That means we are 16 minutes and 20 seconds light. We have that much time to fill to make the show equal out to 30 minutes. The show starts at 4 o'clock, right? It starts at 4. It's supposed to end right at 4:30, right at 4:30. If we do not end at 4:30, then that's a problem, a big problem, especially if you were actually working as a news producer in any TV market. If it's longer than 30 minutes, your 30-minute show is longer than 30 minutes, you're going to get cut off by whatever network has after the show. You will not get a chance to say goodbye. Your anchor will not get to say goodbye. You might be in the middle of a story, and your show will be cut off. The network takes over. You don't get a say in that. And you can't preempt network programming because that's a big no-no as well. Also, you can't drop commercial breaks because people paid money to have their commercials aired during all of those breaks you have in your show. So you can't just drop breaks to make your show fit into the 4 o'clock to 4:30 time. So you really do have to write your show precisely to have it be a 30-minute show. All right. Now, as you see, even though it's a 30-minute show, we really have no stories in here other than some weather stuff accounted for and some breaks accounted for. You only have 16 minutes and 20 seconds to fill, and that time will be deducted again because the sports anchor writes their own block, and they take up a good about 4 minutes and 30 seconds for their segment, and sometimes longer. Sometimes they'll go into 5:30 territory, but they're supposed to tell you about that, so you can account for that time. So you really have more so about 10 or 11 minutes to fill as a news producer every day, which is not that hard, but when stories come in late, then you'll realize that you can get a little antsy about getting stories in. So that's something to note. You do need to work quickly so you know how many stories you will need to fill before 4 o'clock. And 4 o'clock comes really, really fast when you're sitting here. You can ask anyone in the room that's been through it before. It comes really fast. Okay. So you really only have about maybe 10 or 11 minutes of a show to fill. Okay, all right. So we've gone through a couple things. You guys know how to find the correct template for the show. You have to go to the days, the day's date that you're working under, whatever date that is. You have to go to News 3 Live at 4. You know how to add a story. You right-click. You add your item, you put your slug name in here, your script name in there. That means the same thing, slug or script name, same thing. Another thing we haven't gone over. All right, let's say that you want to change your slug name or your script name for some reason, right? Let's say it's just not a good name, or it's not very descriptive, or it's confusing. Maybe you spelled something wrong. Let's say you spelled something wrong and you want to change it. All right, so you click on your story, not double click, just a single click, and then hit escape. You'll see that now you have the ability to click in and delete, backspace, and replace the words or the entire slug if you need to. Once you're done, just hit enter. It's there. You're good to go. All right, nothing happened to the script. The script is still the same nonsense I happened to put into the script. You see, it's all there. All right, now I'm going to Control W to close it. See how quick it closed? Didn't lock me out. We're good to go. All right, the next thing we're going to go over is how to move the script. Let's say I want to put waterline break under weather. All right, and this is all the weather stuff. All right, so what I'm going to do is I have to make sure that I'm in move scripts mode. So how do I do that? I already gave you a hint. So you go up to rundown, you click on rundown, move scripts mode. Click that. Make sure there's a little check mark there. When you click under it again, you'll see the check mark. Now You have the ability to move any of the elements in your show. Do you want to move all of them? No, you do not, because some of them are in there where they're supposed to be, and you shouldn't mess with them. But any the content that you write, or maybe your associate producer writes as well, you might want to move it around in the A block, let's say. Maybe something should be after weather. Maybe it makes sense to talk about a waterline break after weather. Maybe it was cold and something happened to the waterline. All right, so you're going to click it, drag it down, release, and it's there, right? So I want to move it back. I click it, hold it. You got to hold down the mouse as well. Hold that down. I'm dropping it under welcome. I release the mouse. Now it's moved. If I want to move it again, I click on it once, hold it down. You see it's moving. You see the black line. It's going to go wherever the black line is and release. And there it is. All right. So that's how you move your story, whatever story you've done. Go ahead and practice that by moving whatever story, whatever fake story you've created in the rundown, and move that somewhere in the A block. Okay, now let's say you want to drop the story entirely. Let's say you don't think it's newsworthy for that day, or you want to drop it out because you've put so many stories in the show, you don't think it's the most important story, so you're going to kill that story out. All right, so what you do is you click on that story, whatever story it is, you right click it, hit drop item. Do not delete it. Do not delete that. You click on drop, and then it literally drops it out of the show. So if you go down, you scroll all the way down, you'll see that your story now is at the bottom of the show. Now, it's not really at the bottom of the show per se, because see this EOS line here? EOS means end of show. That's the abbreviation for it, okay? So everything after the EOS line does not exist in the teleprompter. No one can see anything from these three slugs in the teleprompter. They don't exist to the prompter. And the same for TOS, which is right here. TOS means top of show, okay? So anything above TOS doesn't exist, and anything below EOS does not exist. The only things that exist for the teleprompter and for the timing mechanism has to be inside of TOS and EOS. It has to be inside this area between the two, all right? So if you put it above TOS, and you shouldn't, you should really put it at the very bottom under EOS. So anything above TOS or under EOS does not exist in the prompter. And that's where, and under EOS is where you should store your stories that you might want to use, but you're really not sure if you're going to, or you have something extra written just in case something happens. For example, when someone important was reportedly dead, but no one had confirmed that. One of my producers wrote an obit story just in case this person died, and we were able to confirm it during our newscast. Okay, so they wrote the story as if this person had died, and a little bio about this person. We found out probably 4 minutes before the show, probably at 3:56, we found out that this person indeed was dead. I had been confirmed that this person had died by several national news outlets. Okay, so what this producer was able to do, they were able to move their story, which was dead. You know, that's where stories go to die, right, underneath EOS. They moved it up. They dragged it up to the top. Remember how to do that? I showed you. And they put it underneath the welcome. And they rewrote the welcome. and they put the story in, they copy and pasted, and we had breaking news off the top of our show. It was done very quickly. It was able to be done quickly because they had pre-written the story and put it under EOS just in case we needed it later. Okay, so that's where you can store content that maybe could be a breaking news story that we're tipped off on. We write it as if it's true, but we're not putting it in the show until it's confirmed, that kind of stuff. Also, things that just we're not going to use in general, things that you don't think were newsworthy or didn't think was well written. Because as a producer, as the person who's in charge of the show, and that's what the producer is, there's one producer for each newscast. The rest of the class participates as an associate producer or a videographer, or the other half of the class does like a Thursday or a Tuesday, all right? Because you guys will be broken into 2 different groups starting week 3. So half of you are on a Tuesday, half of you are on a Thursday. Now, you are not required, if you are a Tuesday newscast person, you're not required to come on Thursday and help write, but I will say that many people do come in to get more writing experience, and it usually is beneficial to them. But the class, this class just does dictate that you put a lot of work into it, and that's why I only require you to come in and work on 1 a week, because that's a lot of time and effort into that one class, okay? But I do encourage all of you to be there for both shows, even if you're coming in to just help write teases or something like that, because it will be a better experience for you. And the more that you immerse yourself in this class, the better you'll do. Because by the end of the semester, you'll be required for your final to create your own 15-minute newscast. You're the only one that writes it. No one else is in your show doing anything. So it's all you. So by the end of the semester, you want to be able to write an entire show from scratch without anyone's help. And you'll need to be able to do that quickly because you only have a 2-hour window to write that show. So if that encourages you to come in and help more, that's great. I'll say last semester, everyone came in and helped each day somehow, in some way, even if it was to help edit video or something like that. So if you have a particular set of skills that you think you're a better writer than you are something else, come in and just ask the producer, hey, what do you need me to do? It will be helpful. I can guarantee that. It'll be helpful for the entire crew, and it'll be helpful for you too to get more experience working on the shows. Okay. So we talked about you guys breaking into 2 different lab groups, writing the shows, that kind of thing. All of that is really important. We've talked about how to drop an item. We've talked about how to move scripts. I've told you guys how to save. So how to save a script is Control-S, and how to close the Word document, the Word script, is Control-W. I said do not hit the X on the script page because that can lock you out of that script for a good 10 to 15 minutes, and that is a long time in TV news world to be locked out of a script. We've talked about typing stories. To type stories, you want to have them in uppercase ultimately for the anchor to read. If you type them in lowercase and then make them uppercase later, that is fine. That is a good way to spell check. I do take points off for misspelled words for lots of reasons. You should know how to spell. You should know how to use spell check. If spell check doesn't help you, someone else reading your script could catch an error. Misspelled words are the common reason our anchors will stumble over a script on air live and butcher it. We cannot have misspellings. They're just not okay. It's not professional. So if you are not the most savvy speller out there, I'd really encourage you to double and triple check your scripts. And then if you've gone over them, have someone else go over them, because you'd be surprised how many times someone else can find something wrong with a script, even though you've looked at it a lot of times. I'll give you an example. I used to produce a 2-hour morning show in Ohio, and I'd come in at 10 o'clock at night, and that was the beginning of my shift, and the end of my shift was 7:30 in the morning. Okay, so on that overnight shift, you don't sleep a lot for various reasons. Barking dog, the mailman, making him bark in the morning. Your sleeping time is when everyone else is milling around. Okay, so there's going to be lots of phones ringing and that kind of thing, and it's really annoying. That's that's my overnight producing experience. So when you're sleep deprived, especially, and some of you might come in sleep deprived, I'm not sure what you're up to, you will type things that make sense to you and don't make sense necessarily to somebody else, right? And that is because you're tired and you wrote something and you left out maybe some words that you keep filling in with your head, but you didn't put them actually in the script, right? And I've done that. I've done that a couple times to my anchors. So what the nice thing was is after I was done writing the entire show for them, they'd come in. Our show was on air at 5 a.m. They'd come in right at 4 o'clock a.m., an hour before their show, to log into their computers and start reading their scripts so they knew what was going on that day and they wouldn't stumble over them, because you do need to read your script before the show, and that helps you. So they'd read them, go over them, go, hey, Jasmine, in this story, etc., etc., I think, did you leave some words out here? And I'd go, oh, sorry, I didn't even notice that, right? So that does happen where you will fill in the blanks in something. If you're reading it in your head especially, you'll catch it, probably catch an error if you read it aloud to yourself, read it actually out loud. So if I catch you talking to yourself in this class, I'm okay with that, because you should be talking aloud. You should be saying things aloud. You should be reading your stories aloud to make sure that they sound conversational, because we do not write in a newspaper tone. We do not write in AP style, Associated Press style. We write conversationally. We are talking to people at home, right? They are watching us. We are talking to them in their living room or maybe at a bar or wherever they're watching us, but we are using conversational language. It's professional language, but it's conversational. And we have to be understood the first time, because we can't imagine that people have the luxury to go and hit the rewind button and watch it again. So if they don't understand us the first time they hear us, then we messed up. And they're very likely to change the channel. And you don't want that. So I encourage you to read aloud your stories, make sure they make sense. You'll catch errors better if you read them aloud. You'll also catch errors if you have someone else read the script. Now that the anchors will get a chance to have at your scripts and read them and make sure they make sense to them, but sometimes they don't catch them, because honestly, sometimes anchors don't get through all of the scripts like they should. It's still the producer's job to put good stories together and to make sure everything makes sense. If you're the producer and your associate producer, the person who's assisting you and helping write some things, if they mess up something and you don't catch that as the producer, the onus is on you to catch it. It's actually your error because you didn't catch that. Because producers, this is your show. This is your responsibility ultimately. You are the person who's in charge of the show. So if you didn't see something that was wrong in your show, what would happen in the real world is you would have to account for that. You would have to talk to the boss, the higher ups. You'd have to explain why you didn't account for that and why it was your poor time management maybe that you didn't get to that script and that kind of thing. Now, on certain days, we'll have an executive producer in here, and that will be probably a senior. If we don't have an EP in there, then it'll be me going over scripts and trying to catch your errors. But it doesn't always happen, because you'll find out we become very busy. We have a lot of people in the newsroom, lots of reporters coming in, putting stories in. The anchors come in with stories. the sports anchor's coming in, we're talking to the weather anchor about the weather that day. Things get very busy. Things become very real in the newsroom. It becomes a working newsroom. So producers, it's your responsibility. If you're worried about a script and you don't think it makes sense, then you need to call someone's attention to it and have us look at it. Have me look at it, have maybe an executive producer look at it, have your anchors look at it, have one of your peers in the class look at it and say, hey, do you think this is okay? Do you think this makes sense? If it's not easily understood the first time that you read it, then there's something wrong with it, and it needs to be broken down and taken apart and rewritten. So that's why I say the show can take a while to get finished, even though it's maybe only 10 or 11 minutes of content that are being incorporated into the script, and 5 people are helping do that. Just because a story is written doesn't mean it's a good one. So you need to really be very picky about how the scripts read, how the story is told. That's something that's very important, and that's the producer's job, to make sure that all of those scripts make sense. All right, let's go back into our script. So go ahead and click into whatever made up story you have. All right, so I've opened up my script about that waterline break, and let's say you now know what anchor that you want to read your script. We've written the entire show. We're going to fast forward. So it's about, let's say it's 3:40. Well, no, it's too late. Let's say it's about 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock, because you really want the show written at about 3 o'clock, 3:15. You want the show completed, ready to print, that kind of thing. All right. Let's say you now know that you want Emily to read this story after you've written everything. So you'll put the name in the talent box, and then go to the switcher, and whatever camera Emily is supposed to be, you'd put here. Now, we do not have the anchors and what cameras they're on the board yet, but you'll see from last semester that the initials were written. It's on the far right lower corner of the whiteboard. You'll see last semester anchor initials and what sides of the desk they're on. And you'll see some overlapping lines because camera 1 and camera 3, camera 3 is in the middle, and camera 1 and camera 2 are on opposite sides of one another. So you'll see that the camera opposite of that, well, you'll have to take a look at it because I'm not going to explain it like this. But once we have, we know where the anchors are sitting on the desk, we'll know what camera they're supposed to be, and we'll go more into this when I come into class and show you. But let's say, for just the sake of writing it, Emily is on camera 1. Okay, so I'm going to okay that. And that means that when Emily reads this story on camera, she is on camera 1. Okay, so that is your job to put in here, producers. You need to put the anchor's name and what camera she appears on in the talent box here. All right, so I need to Control S that to save it. It saves, and then I'm going to Control W it to close it. Okay, and here you have Emily's name that pops up in the talent box. However, note that nothing pops up in the format column. The format column is also the producer's job. Okay, so you know that you put Emily on camera 1 in the script. You go over here in format and go Cam 1. All I did was click on the box, go to the keyboard, type it, and hit enter. And there you go. Okay, so now in the script, Emily is on camera 1, Control W to close, and now in the format column, it's camera 1. And now when I print off this list, this rundown for the production crew, they'll know to put Emily on camera 1 for the story. Okay, so you've got to put it in 2 different places, in the script and then in the format column.